The galaxy was quiet on the day humanity vanished. No explosions marked their departure, no wars drove them away. They simply left, and the stars felt emptier for it. Captain Derek Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the horizon's edge, and looked at the faces of his crew one last time. They had made their choice. Every human in the galaxy had voted, and the decision was final. They were going home, and they were closing the door behind them. Derek activated the communication system that would broadcast to every species in the known galaxy. His message was simple and clear. This is Captain Derek Morrison of Earth. Humanity is leaving. We're going home. Don't follow us. Don't look for us. We need to be alone for a while. Maybe forever, the alien species didn't understand. The Xanthari, with their crystalline bodies and logical minds, couldn't comprehend why humans would abandon hundreds of colonies. The Corvians, proud reptilian warriors, thought it was a trick. The Threks, insectoid builders of massive hive cities, calculated that humans would return within a decade. They were all wrong. 300 years passed. The galaxy changed without humanity. New trade routes opened, new alliances formed. The Galactic Council grew from 20 species to 47. Peace became normal, not the exception. Wars still happened, but they were small, manageable, nothing like the chaos that seemed to follow wherever humans went. Lisa Grant was born 200 years after the humans left. She was Corvian, but she had always been fascinated by the missing species. As a child, she read every story about them. Humans who climbed mountains just because they were there. Humans who sailed oceans in wooden boats. Humans who looked at a dead planet and said, "We can fix that." Now, she was a scientist, one of the best xenorchaeologists in the galaxy. She studied dead civilizations, trying to understand how they lived and why they died. But her real passion was studying the civilization that wasn't dead, just gone. Her research partner was Kelver, a Xanthari who thought she was obsessed. He was probably right. They stood together in what used to be Houston, a major human city on Earth. The buildings still stood, covered in plants that humans had engineered to grow fast. The plants had taken over everything, turning the city into a jungle of metal and green. "Look at this," Lisa said, pointing to a coffee shop. The tables were still set. Cups sat where humans had left them, now full of dust and dead leaves. They left in the middle of their day. They were drinking coffee, eating breakfast, living their lives. And then they just walked away. Kelver's body flickered with colors that meant he was thinking hard. The records say they had 3 weeks to evacuate. They took only what they could carry. Everything else stayed. Lisa walked through the coffee shop, imagining the humans who had sat here. Why? Why would they do this? Humans don't quit. Every story about them says the same thing. They're stubborn. They never give up. So why did they give up on the entire galaxy? Perhaps they didn't give up, Kelver suggested. Perhaps they were afraid. Of what? They were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Their technology was advancing faster than anyone else's. They had colonies on 100 worlds. What could scare them enough to make them run? Kelver didn't answer. He was looking at something on his scanner. "Lisa, come here. I found something." She hurried over. Kelver was standing in front of what? Looked like a normal wall, but his scanner showed there was a room behind it. A hidden room. It took them an hour to find the door. It was disguised perfectly, blending with the wall. Inside they found a small office. A computer sat on a desk, still working after 300 years. Human technology was built to last. Lisa activated the computer. Most of the files were locked, but one folder was left open, almost like someone wanted it to be found. Inside was a single document. At the top in simple letters was one word, sanctuary. Below that were coordinates. A location deep in space in what used to be human territory. And below the coordinates was a message. If you're reading this, it means someone finally came looking. We didn't leave because we were afraid of you. We left because we were afraid of us. Humanity was changing, and not in ways we could control. We were becoming something dangerous, something that could hurt everyone, including ourselves. So we quarantined ourselves. We went home to figure out what we were becoming. If you find this message, don't follow the coordinates. Don't come looking. Some doors should stay closed. But if you must know, if you can't leave it alone, then come find us. Just understand that the humans who left are not the humans you'll find. We've had 300 years to change. Signed, Dr. Helen Murphy, last director of Earth's Zoological Studies. Lisa read the message 3 times? Kelver's color shifted to dark blue, his species' version of fear. We should report this to the council, he said quietly. We should, Lisa agreed. But she was already copying the coordinates to her personal device. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the message. Humans were changing. They had 300 years to change. What were they now? And why did they think they were dangerous? The Galactic Council had sealed off all human territory after they left. 50 systems, including Earth's solar system, were marked as forbidden zones. No one was allowed to enter. The Council said it was to preserve human property until they returned. But Lisa had always suspected there was another reason. What if the humans had told the Council something? What if they explained why they were leaving, and the Council decided it was better to let them go? She pulled up the old records from the year humanity left. The Council meetings were public, but large sections were classified. She tried to access them and was immediately blocked. Top secret. Only Council members could read them. But Lisa was good at her job. She knew how to find information that people wanted hidden. It took her 3 days, but she finally cracked the encryption. What she found made her blood run cold. The last human ambassador to the Galactic Council, a man named Peter Shaw, had stood before the entire assembly and told them the truth. Humanity was evolving. Not through genetic engineering or cybernetic implants, but through something else. Something they discovered in their quantum experiments. Something that lived in the space between atoms in the dark matter that made up most of the universe. Humanity had made contact with it, and it had changed them. Peter Shaw's final words to the Council were simple. We are becoming something that should not exist in your galaxy. For your safety and ours, we are leaving. Seal our borders. Forget about us. And whatever you do, don't come looking. We may not be able to control what we're becoming. The Council had voted unanimously to seal human space and never speak of the real reason again. Lisa sat back, her heart's pounding. She should delete this information. She should forget what she read. She should move on with her life and study some other mystery. Instead, she called Kelver. I found something, she said. And I think we need to break the law. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to impress. It floated in orbit around a neutron star, a reminder that even the most dense and dangerous things in the universe could be harnessed with cooperation. 147 species had representatives here, and today all of them looked worried. Counselor Prime Theron stood at the center platform, his scales dark with stress. He was a Corvian, a species that had ruled 30 systems for 5,000 years. Very little scared them. But today, Theron was scared. 3 days ago, he announced, his voice carried by translation devices to every species in their own language, a Threx mining vessel called the Harvest Moon crossed into Sector 447. This sector has been sealed for 289 years. It is former human territory. The chamber erupted with noise. Some species clicked, others hummed, a few shouted in their various languages. Everyone knew the rules. No one entered human space, ever. Ambassador Lissa of the Delphini Collective raised her webbed hand. Her species lived underwater and communicated through sonar, but the translators made her voice sound like singing. What happened to the vessel? Theron's scales turned almost black. It vanished. No debris. No distress signal. The last transmission we received was ... unusual. I'll play it now. The lights dimmed. A holographic projection filled the center of the chamber. It showed the view from the Harvest Moon's bridge. Space looked normal at first, just stars and darkness. Then something changed. The darkness became darker. It was hard to describe, but everyone watching felt it. The darkness became thick, almost solid. And then cutting through that impossible darkness came a ship. It was human in design, but wrong. Human ships used to be practical, built for function over form. The ship looked alive. Its hull seemed to breathe. Patterns flowed across its surface like water, like light, like something that couldn't exist in normal space. A voice came through the transmission, male, calm, speaking in standard galactic common with a perfect accent. You were warned not to follow. You were given 3 centuries of peace. That time is ending. Then the Harvest Moon's transmission cut off. The chamber exploded with panic. Species that had never known fear felt it crawling through their bodies. The Threx ambassador, a massive insectoid named Zrix, stood on 6 legs and shouted over the noise. "Where is our ship? Where are our people?" Theron raised his hands for quiet. 2 days after the transmission ended, the Harvest Moon appeared in orbit around your homeworld. All crew members were aboard, alive and unharmed. But they have no memory of what happened after entering human space. Medical scans show they were simply unconscious for 48 hours. "That's impossible," Zrix insisted. "Our homeworld is 6 weeks' travel from Sector 447. "I know," Theron said quietly. "Someone moved your ship across 6 weeks of space in 2 days, did it without leaving a mark, and returned your crew safely. Someone wanted to send a message without killing anyone." "The humans," Lissa said. "They're still there." "We knew they were still there," another voice called out. "The Council has been monitoring their space for 3 centuries. We know their planets are still inhabited. We just don't know what they're doing." Theron nodded. "That's correct. But this is the first time they've responded to a breach of their territory. And their message is clear. Time is running out." "Time for what?" someone asked. No one had an answer. Far from the Council chamber, in the depths of space that used to be called the Sol System, Captain Jake Palmer stood on the bridge of his ship. He was 42 years old, born on Earth 60 years after humanity had sealed itself away from the galaxy. He had never met an alien. He had never left human space. But he had trained his entire life for this moment. His ship, the Messenger, was one of 300 vessels in the human fleet. Not the entire human fleet, just the part that would make first contact. The real fleet, the one that would fight if fighting became necessary, was much larger and much stranger. "Sir, the Council is debating," reported First Officer Amy Rhodes. She was younger than Jake, only 30, but she had the same tired eyes. Everyone in the fleet had tired eyes. Training to bend reality took a toll. "Let them debate," Jake said. "We have 2 weeks before the architects detect the breach. After that, nothing we say will matter. They'll come and we'll have to stop them." Amy checked her readings. Her console didn't have buttons or switches. It responded to thought, to intention, to the quantum field that humans had learned to manipulate. "The Council doesn't know about the architects." "No," Jake agreed. "And we can't tell them yet. They wouldn't believe us. Hell, they barely believe we still exist." Another officer, a man named Chris Bennett, spoke up from the navigation station. "Sir, we're receiving a signal. Someone is trying to enter Sector 447, a small research vessel. 2 occupants." Jake felt a headache building. He knew this would happen eventually. Someone would get curious. Someone would break the rules. Identity? Dr. Lisa Grant, Corvian Xenorchaeologist, and Kelver Xanthari Research Assistant. Their ship is called the Wanderer. Intentions? They're broadcasting on all frequencies. They say they found a message, coordinates to something called Sanctuary. They want to know the truth. Jake closed his eyes. The truth. How could he explain the truth? How could he tell the galaxy that humanity had discovered something living in the quantum foam of reality, something ancient and vast and completely incomprehensible? How could he explain that this thing had noticed humanity's experiments, noticed how humans kept pushing, kept questioning, kept refusing to accept the universe's limits? The thing had given humanity a choice: evolve or die, transform or be removed like a cancer. Humanity had chosen to evolve. "Let them through," Jake said finally. "But guide them. Don't let them see everything. Not yet. Bring them to Earth. I'll meet with them personally." Amy looked surprised. Sir, are you sure? First contact protocols say, protocols were written for a controlled situation, Jake interrupted. This isn't controlled. Someone found Helen's message. That means it's time. Get Claire's team ready. We're going to need someone who can explain this gently. Chris spoke up again. Sir, with respect, there's no gentle way to explain what we've become. Jake smiled, but there was no humor in it. I know, but Claire is better at it than I am. She's been practicing. The Wanderer crossed into human space without incident. Lisa expected weapons, warnings, maybe automated defenses. Instead, she got a simple voice transmission. Dr. Grant Kelver, this is Claire Thompson of Earth. Welcome to Sanctuary. Please follow the navigation beacon we're sending you. Don't deviate from the path. Some areas of our space are dangerous, even for us. Lisa's hands shook as she followed the beacon. Beside her, Kelver's entire body had turned pale, his species' fear response. This is a mistake, he whispered. We should turn back. We're past the point of turning back, Lisa said. She was trying to sound brave, but her voice cracked. The beacon led them deeper into the system. And then they saw Earth. It wasn't the dead world from the records. It wasn't the abandoned planet that satellite images showed. This Earth gleamed with lights. Cities covered the continents, but they weren't like cities Lisa knew. These cities were organic, grown rather than built. They spiraled upward in patterns that hurt to look at, following mathematical rules that shouldn't exist. Orbital rings surrounded the planet, not the industrial structures of the past, but living things, forests and lakes suspended in space by technology that made no sense. The moon wasn't gray anymore. It was green and blue, covered in domes that held entire ecosystems. What did they do? Kelver whispered. They changed everything, Lisa breathed. A ship approached them, small and elegant. Claire Thompson's voice came through again. Docking in 60 seconds. Don't be afraid. I promise we won't hurt you. We're still human. We're just human. Plus a bit more. The ships connected. A door opened. And Lisa Grant, xenoarchaeologist who had spent her life studying dead civilizations, walked through to meet a species that had 300 years to become something new. Claire Thompson waited on the other side. She looked human, perfectly normal. Young, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. But when Lisa looked closer, she saw things that were wrong. Claire's shadow moved independently. Her eyes reflected light that wasn't there. And around her, space itself seemed to bend slightly, like she was heavier than she should be. Welcome, Claire said, extending her hand. I know you have questions. I promise we'll answer everything. But first, you need to understand something important. We didn't leave because we were afraid of you. We left because we were becoming something that could hurt you. We needed time to learn control. And now that time is up. Something is coming, something that will destroy everything the galaxy has built. And only we can stop it. Lisa took Claire's hand. It felt normal, warm, and solid. But when their hands touched, Lisa felt it. A vibration like touching a tuning fork. Like touching something that existed in more dimensions than 3? What are you? Lisa asked. Claire's smile was sad. We're what happens when a species refuses to stop asking questions. We're what happens when curiosity meets the fundamental code of reality. We're human, Dr. Grant. We're just human that learned to speak the universe's language. Behind Claire, through the windows of the docking bay, Claire led Lisa and Kelver through corridors that seemed to shift when they weren't looking directly at them. The walls were smooth, made of something that looked like metal, but felt warm and alive under Lisa's hand when she touched it. Your ship, Lisa said, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. It's not made of normal matter, is it? Define normal, Claire replied with a small smile. It's made of atoms, protons, electrons, all the usual pieces. We just convince them to arrange themselves in ways that textbooks say are impossible. Turns out matter is a lot more flexible than anyone thought. You just have to ask Nusley. Kelver made a sound like wind chimes, his species' version of nervous laughter. You talk about matter like it's alive? Isn't everything? Claire stopped at a large window that looked out at Earth. Every atom in your body was once part of a star. Those atoms remember being fire and light. They remember the beginning of the universe. We just learned how to have a conversation with them. She turned to face her guests. I know this sounds like religion or mysticism. It's not. It's science, just science that took us 300 years to understand. Let me show you. Claire held out her hand, palm up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then light began to gather above her palm, not reflecting off anything, just appearing from nowhere. The light twisted and folded, taking shape. Within seconds, a perfect flower sat in her hand, solid and real. She handed it to Lisa. Lisa took it carefully. It felt real, smelled real, even had morning dew on its petals. How? I asked the universe very politely, Claire said. Look, I'll explain it simply. Everything in reality is made of quantum fields. These fields exist everywhere, all the time. Most species interact with these fields unconsciously. You see light because photons interact with your eyes? You feel heat because atoms vibrate. Normal stuff. But humans, we learn to interact with these fields consciously. We learn to ask them to do things they don't normally do. And because we ask nicely, because we learn the right mathematics, the right harmonics, they listen. That's impossible, Kelver said. But his voice was uncertain. 200 years ago? Faster than light travel was impossible, Claire countered. 100 years ago, terraforming a planet was impossible. 50 years ago, the Zentari couldn't exist in oxygen atmospheres. But you figured it out, adapted, changed. We just changed in a different direction. She gestured to the window. Come on! There's someone who wants to meet you. They took a transport pod through the city. Lisa pressed her face to the window, trying to absorb everything. The buildings weren't just structures. They were alive or close to it. Trees grew up through them, becoming part of the architecture. Water flowed in streams that defied gravity, running up walls and across ceilings. People walked below, humans who looked normal except for the way they moved, like dancers who knew steps Lisa couldn't see. How many of you are there? Lisa asked. About 40 billion, spread across 12 planets and 200 orbital habitats. We could have more. We could easily support 1 trillion people with our technology. But we learned that bigger isn't always better. Quality of life matters more than quantity. The pod arrived at a building that looked like it had grown from the earth rather than being built. Inside, they entered a room that was part garden, part laboratory. A man sat at a desk, reviewing holographic displays that showed equations Lisa couldn't begin to understand. He looked up as they entered and smiled. He was older than Claire, maybe 50, with gray in his hair and laugh lines around his eyes. But like Claire, there was something off about him. His presence was too large, like his body was just a small part of something bigger. Dr. Grant, Kelver, welcome. I'm Jake Palmer. Sorry about the dramatic entrance with the Threx ship. We had to get the Council's attention, and subtlety wasn't working. You moved their ship across 6 weeks of space in 2 days, Lisa said. How? Jake stood and walked to a different holographic display. With a gesture, he brought up a map of the galaxy. Space isn't what you think it is. It's not empty. It's not a vacuum. It's full of energy, dark energy, quantum fluctuations, things that exist between the spaces you can measure. We learn to navigate those spaces. To us, moving across the galaxy is like you walking from one room to another. Different rules apply. Why? Kelver asked. His color had returned to normal, curiosity overcoming fear. Why did you learn all this? What were you preparing for? Jake's expression became serious. Because we found out we weren't alone in the quantum field. There's something else there. Something ancient. We call them the architects. He changed the holographic display. Now it showed something that made Lisa's heart skip. Massive structures, each one the size of a moon, composed of matter that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. They moved through space by simply choosing to be somewhere else. The architects have been around for billions of years, Jake continued. They don't think like us. They don't feel emotions. They're more like the universe's immune system. Their job is to maintain balance. And when a species grows too fast, becomes too successful, threatens that balance, the architects notice. And then they clean up the problem. By killing the species, Lisa said quietly. Usually, yes. They've done it 1 billion times across the history of the universe. Every intelligent species eventually reaches a critical point. They expand too much, use too many resources, threaten the ecological balance of the galaxy. The architects step in and reset everything. Start over. The galaxy has been cleansed and reborn more times than stars in the sky. Claire sat down on a bench that seemed to grow from the floor to meet her. 300 years ago, humanity was approaching that critical point. We were expanding fast, terraforming planets, consuming resources, changing everything we touched. We were headed for the same fate as 1 billion species before us. Extinction by architect. But we got lucky, Jake said. During quantum experiments, we accidentally made contact with the quantum field in a new way. We touched something in there, some kind of intelligence or awareness. It noticed us. And instead of just calling the architects immediately, it gave us a choice. What choice? Lisa asked, though she thought she already knew the answer. Evolve or die. Transform into something that could exist in balance with the universe, or be removed like every other species that grew too fast. So we made the hardest decision in human history. We abandoned the galaxy. We came home. We sealed our borders and spent 3 centuries learning to become something new. Jake walked over to the window, looking out at the transformed Earth. We learned to manipulate quantum fields. We learned to talk to the universe. We changed our bodies, not through genetics, but through consciousness. We evolved from a species that takes from the universe to a species that gives back. We became shepherds instead of parasites. And now? Kelver asked. Now the Threx broke our boundary, Claire said softly. Their mining ship crossed into our space and triggered the sensors we placed. Sensors that connect to the quantum field. Sensors that told the architects there's activity in this region again. Jake turned back to face them, and Lisa saw fear in his eyes for the first time. The architects are coming. They detected the signal. They think the species in this region has reached critical mass. They're coming to cleanse the galaxy. And they'll kill everyone. Not just the Threx who broke the boundary, everyone, every species in the Galactic Council. 47 civilizations, trillions of beings, all gone. That's how architects work. They don't take chances. The room fell silent except for the soft sound of water flowing through the living walls. How long? Lisa asked. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. They're slow by our standards, but they're coming. We detected their approach 4 days ago. Can you stop them? Jake and Claire looked at each other. Some unspoken communication passed between them, faster than words. We can try, Jake said finally. We've been preparing for this for 300 years. We knew they would come eventually. We just hoped it would be later, after we had more time to prepare the galaxy. But the Threx forced our hand. Now we have to act. What do you need from us? Lisa asked. We need the Council to trust us, Claire said. We need them to evacuate their core worlds, gather their fleets in designated safe zones, and most importantly, not interfere when we fight the architects. We'll be bending reality in ways that will seem impossible. Some species might think we're the enemy. They might try to fight us along with the architects. We can't afford that distraction, and if you fail? Kelver asked quietly. Then everyone dies, Jake said simply. The architects will cleanse the galaxy, and in 1,000,000 years, new species will evolve and try again. That's how it's always worked. Lisa stood up. Her legs felt weak, but her mind was racing. 300 years ago, humanity had discovered they were on a path to extinction. Instead of fighting or denying it, they changed. They evolved. They became something that could survive. What killed everyone else, and now they were offering to protect the species that had been living in peace while humans struggled and changed and learned to talk to the universe. I'll tell the Council, Lisa said. I don't know if they'll believe me, but I'll try. That's all we ask, Claire said. She stood and offered her hand again. Thank you, Dr. Grant, for having the courage to look for us. For being curious enough to ask questions. That's very... The Galactic Council chamber had never been this full. Every species sent representatives. Even species that normally stayed away from politics sent observers. Word had spread fast. The humans were back, and they brought impossible news. Lisa stood at the central platform, the same place where Counselor Theron had shown them the transmission from the Threx ship. She was terrified. She had spent her entire career studying the past. Now she had to convince the galaxy to trust its future to a species that had been gone for 3 centuries. 3 days ago, Lisa began, her voice amplified to every translator in the room. I entered human space. I met them. I spoke with their leaders. And I learned the truth about why they left. The chamber was silent. Every eye, sensor, and perception organ focused on her. Humanity discovered something 300 years ago. Something living in the quantum field that makes up reality. They call it the universe's immune system. We call it the architects. She activated the holographic display, showing the images Jake had shared with her. The massive structures that existed between dimensions. Things that looked like they were made of folded space and broken time. The architects have existed for billions of years. Their purpose is to maintain balance in the galaxy. When a species grows too large, consumes too much, threatens ecological stability, the architects appear, and they cleanse. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some species understood immediately. Others needed translation not just of words, but of concepts. Counselor Theron stood. Dr. Grant, are you saying these architects are coming here? Yes, the Threx mining ship that crossed into human space triggered sensors. Those sensors connected to the quantum field. The architects detected the signal. They're coming to cleanse our galaxy. All of us, every species in the council. We have less than 2 weeks. The chamber erupted. Some species shouted in anger. Others in fear. Ambassador Lissa of the Delphini tried to speak but couldn't be heard over the noise. Lisa raised her voice. But humanity believes they can stop them. The noise died down. Everyone waited. Humans spent 300 years learning to manipulate the quantum field. They evolved. They changed into something that can interact with reality at a fundamental level. They can fight the architects, but they need our cooperation. They need us to evacuate core worlds and gather fleets in safe zones. And most importantly, they need us not to interfere when the battle begins. Zrix, the Threx ambassador whose ship had caused this crisis, stood on his 6 legs. Why should we trust them? The humans were always aggressive, always pushing boundaries. For all we know, they're the real threat. These architects might not even exist. This could be a trick to make us weak. I saw Earth, Lisa said firmly. I saw what they've become. They're not lying. And they're not trying to conquer us. If they wanted to, they already could. They can move ships across the galaxy in days. They can create matter from energy. They can bend space itself. If humans wanted to rule us, we'd already be ruled. An elder species representative spoke up. A being so old that their species' name had been forgotten, simply called the Ancient One. Their voice was like stones grinding together. If humans have become so powerful, why do they need us to cooperate? Why not simply move us against our will? It was a good question. Lisa had asked Jake the same thing. Because that's not who they are anymore, Lisa said. They learned that power without cooperation leads to extinction. They need us to trust them because trust is part of their evolution. They're trying to prove they've changed. That they can be powerful without being tyrants. Theron's scales shifted through several colors, displaying the internal conflict he felt. You're asking us to bet everything on a species we haven't seen in 3 centuries, to trust that they've changed, to believe in these architects based only on their word and your testimony. Yes, Lisa said simply, because we don't have another choice. Even if the architects aren't coming, what harm is there in evacuating our core worlds as a precaution? But if they are coming and we do nothing, everyone dies. Every single being in this galaxy, is your pride worth that risk? The Ancient One spoke again. The human representatives, are they here? They're waiting outside, Lisa said. Jake Palmer, captain of their fleet, and Claire Thompson, their chief scientist. They've requested permission to address the council. Theron looked around the chamber, reading the mood. Finally, he spoke. Let them enter. The doors opened. Jake and Claire walked in together, and the chamber fell absolutely silent. They looked human, perfectly normal. But every species in the room felt it. The pressure. The weight of their presence. Space itself seemed to notice them, to pay attention in ways it didn't pay attention to anyone else. Jake stopped at the central platform. He didn't bow or show deference. He simply looked around the chamber, meeting eyes with representatives from 100 worlds. 300 years ago, Jake said, humanity left because we knew we were becoming something dangerous. We were expanding too fast, pushing too hard, taking too much. We saw the path we were on and we knew where it led, extinction, not because you would destroy us, but because the universe itself would remove us. Claire stepped forward. We made contact with something in the quantum field. Call it God, call it the universe's consciousness, call it whatever makes sense to your species. It showed us the truth. We were approaching a threshold that every successful species eventually reaches. The point where growth becomes cancer, where success becomes extinction. The architects exist to handle species that cross that threshold. We were given a choice, Jake continued. Evolve or be erased, so we chose evolution. We went home. We spent 300 years learning to exist in harmony with the universe instead of opposition to it. We learned to give back instead of just taking. We learned to speak the language of reality itself. He gestured, and the holographic display changed. Now it showed the architects moving through space toward the galaxy, massive, ancient, unstoppable. They're coming. We detected them 9 days ago. They move slowly, but they don't stop. In 12 days, they'll reach the edge of this galactic arm. In 14 days, they'll begin the cleansing. They'll start with the most populated systems and work their way out. Billions will die in the first hour, trillions within the first week. No species in this room has technology that can fight them. Your weapons will pass through them. Your shields will be meaningless. They exist partially outside normal space. You can't hurt what you can't fully touch, but we can, Claire said. We exist in the same spaces they do. We learn their language. We can fight them. But it won't look like any battle you've ever seen. We won't use weapons. We'll use mathematics, harmonics, quantum manipulation. We'll be bending reality itself. And if any of you interfere, if you get caught in the crossfire, we might not be able to protect you. Theron stood again. What exactly are you asking from us? Evacuate your core worlds, Jake said. Move populations to colony worlds in the outer systems. Gather your military fleets at coordinates we'll provide. These are safe zones, places where the quantum field is stable and the architects are less likely to focus. Stay there. Don't leave. Don't try to help us fight. Just survive, that's all we're asking. And if you fail? The Ancient One asked. Jake's expression was grim. Then we all die together. The architects will cleanse the galaxy, and in a few million years, new species will evolve and try again. That's how it's always worked, but we don't plan to fail. We've been preparing for this fight for 3 centuries. We know what we're doing. Ambassador Lissa raised her hand. Why? Why are you doing this? You've been isolated for 300 years. You could stay hidden. Let the architects cleanse the rest of us, then expand into the empty galaxy afterward. Why risk yourselves for species you barely remember? Claire smiled, and for the first time, Lisa saw real human emotion break through the inhuman power. Because we're still human. We still care about things we shouldn't. We still help people we don't have to help. It's our greatest weakness and our greatest strength. We can't just let you die, even though it would be safer for us. Even though it would be logical. We're not built that way. You're crazy, Exric said, but there was respect in his voice. Probably, Jake agreed. But we're crazy in ways that might just save you. So what do you say? Will you trust us? Will you evacuate and let us do what we trained for? Or will you wait here and hope the architects aren't real? Theron looked at the Ancient One, who slowly nodded. He looked at Lissa, who sang her agreement. He looked around the chamber at species who had been at peace for 3 centuries, species who had never faced an existential threat. "We'll put it to a vote," Theron said. "All in favor of accepting the human plan, raise your hand, tentacle, pseudopod, or equivalent." The vote wasn't unanimous. Some species refused to trust humanity, some thought it was a trick, but most raised their appendages in agreement. They would evacuate. They would trust. Jake nodded. "Thank you. Evacuation begins immediately. You have 10 days to move your populations. We'll provide transport for species who need help. After that, the battle begins. Stay in the safe zones no matter what you see or hear. The fighting is going to look impossible. Reality itself will seem to break. Don't panic. Don't leave the safe zones. We know what we're doing." The evacuation took 9 days. Human ships appeared across the galaxy, moving faster than should be possible, helping transport populations to the outer colonies. Lisa watched from Jake's command ship, the Messenger, as entire civilizations packed up and ran. The Corvians emptied 12 core worlds in 3 days. The Delphini drained their capital ocean and moved 20 billion beings to backup habitats. The Threx, whose mistake had triggered this crisis, worked around the clock to relocate their hive cities. Even species who had voted against trusting humanity followed the evacuation orders. Fear was a powerful motivator. On the 10th day, the safe zones were ready. Millions of ships from 100 species gathered in designated areas of space, far from the major gravity wells in regions where the quantum field was naturally stable. They waited. Some prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Some simply hoped. Lisa stood on the bridge of the Messenger with Jake, Claire, and their crew. Through the viewscreen, she could see the human fleet assembling. 300 ships, each one impossible in different ways. Some were covered in patterns that moved. Some seemed to flicker between dimensions. Some left trails of light that spelled out equations in languages no one had taught them. "They're beautiful," Lisa whispered. "They're weapons," Jake corrected, but his voice was soft. "Beautiful weapons, yes. But never forget what they're for. These ships were built to fight things that shouldn't exist. To bend reality so hard it screams. They're beautiful the way a storm is beautiful. Powerful and dangerous and not quite sane." Claire checked her readings. "Architects will enter scanning range in 4 hours. First contact in 6 hours. Battle begins in 7. Are you ready?" Lisa asked. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No one's ready to fight the universe's immune system. But we're as prepared as 300 years of training can make us. We know the mathematics. We know the harmonics. We've practiced in simulations 1 billion times. But this is different. The architects aren't simulations. They're real, and they're older than our species, and they've never lost." "There's a first time for everything," Claire said. The hours passed slowly. Lisa watched the crew prepare. They weren't checking weapons or running system diagnostics like normal soldiers. Instead, they meditated. They synchronized their breathing. They hummed in harmonics that made Lisa's teeth ache. They were preparing their minds, not their ships. Chris Bennett, the navigator, explained when Lisa asked. "The ships respond to consciousness, to intention. We're not flying them the way you fly a normal vessel. We're thinking them through space. All 47 crew members have to think together, move together, be together. We're not individuals anymore. We're one mind with 47 perspectives." "That sounds terrifying," Lisa said. "It is," Chris agreed. "But it's also beautiful. When we fully synchronize, we can perceive 17 dimensions at once. We can see the quantum field like you see visible light. We can hear reality singing to itself. It's worth the terror." An alarm sounded. Soft, musical, but urgent. "Architects detected," Claire announced. "They're entering the system." Jake stood. His entire crew stood with him, perfectly synchronized. "All ships, begin the harmonization. Lisa, Kelver, sit down and strap in. Don't look directly at the view screen once the fighting starts. Watch the sensor displays if you have to watch anything. Lisa sat, her heart's pounding. Through the view screen she saw them, the architects. They came through space like wounds in reality. Each one was enormous, the size of a small moon, but their size was the least frightening thing about them. They were made of geometry that shouldn't exist. Shapes that had too many sides, angles that pointed in directions that weren't up or down or left or right, but somewhere else. Watching them hurt. Lisa's brain tried to process what she was seeing and failed. There were 12 of them. They moved in perfect formation, approaching the galaxy like surgeons approaching a patient. They showed no emotion because they didn't have emotions. They were tools with a job to do. Clean up, start over. Reset the balance. All ships, Jake's voice echoed across the fleet. Begin the song. The human ships moved. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't launch missiles. Instead, they sang. It started as a low hum, barely audible. Then it built. Every ship added its voice, harmonizing with the others. The sound wasn't just audio. It was quantum. It vibrated through multiple dimensions at once, a mathematics made audible. A physics that became music, the architects noticed. They paused, their impossible geometry shifting, focusing on the human fleet. And then the battle truly began. The human ships moved in patterns that made Lisa dizzy. They traced paths through space that looked random but weren't. Each path was part of an equation, a massive calculation being written across three-dimensional space. The ships were writing a message in the language of reality itself, the architects responded. They reached out with appendages that existed partially in normal space and partially somewhere else. Where they touched, space folded. Stars flickered. The quantum field rippled like water. The human song changed, rising to meet the challenge. Now individual harmonics could be heard within the chorus. Each ship sang its own melody, but all the melodies wove together into something larger. A symphony written in quantum mechanics. A prayer that reality couldn't ignore. Lisa watched the sensor displays as Jake had told her to. What she saw didn't make sense. Energy readings spiked into impossible ranges. Spatial dimensions fluctuated. Time itself seemed to slow and speed up randomly. The battle was being fought across 17 dimensions simultaneously, and she could only perceive 3 of them on the messenger's bridge. The crew stood perfectly still, their eyes closed, their voices joining the ship's song. Blood ran from Jake's nose. Sweat poured down Claire's face. Chris was crying, though Lisa didn't think he knew it. The cost of bending reality was written on their bodies. One of the architects reached out and touched a human ship. The ship flickered, caught between dimensions. For a moment, it existed in 7 states simultaneously. Then the other human ships adjusted their song, weaving new harmonics into the pattern, and the touched ship snapped back into normal space. "They're adapting," Amy whispered, her voice strained. "The architects are learning from us." "Good," Jake replied through gritted teeth. "Let them learn." That's the point. The battle raged for an hour. Then, too, the human ships danced and sang, writing equations across space. The architects struck back with attacks that defied physics. Reality itself became a battlefield where the rules were negotiable, and slowly, something began to change. One of the architects stopped attacking. It paused, its impossible geometry shifting, reorganizing. It was listening. Really listening? Not just hearing the human song, but understanding it. The human fleet focused on that one architect, pouring their harmonics into it, showing it patterns it had never considered, proving that growth didn't always mean imbalance. That evolution could go in directions the architects had never imagined. The architect sang back. The sound was nothing like the human song. It was older, deeper, made of mathematics that predated stars. But it was communication. For the first time in billions of years, the architects were having a conversation instead of a cleansing. "They're listening," Claire gasped, blood running from her ears now. "They're actually listening." "Keep going," Jake commanded. "Show them everything. Show them humanity's choice. Show them what evolution looks like when a species chooses harmony over dominance." The human song reached a crescendo. Every ship, every mind, every quantum field manipulation came together in one massive harmonic. They showed the architects the last 300 years, the choice humanity made, the evolution they underwent, the balance they achieved. They showed them that there was another way. The other architects began to listen. One by one, they stopped attacking and started responding. Their ancient geometries shifted, changed, reorganized into new patterns. They were learning. After billions of years of doing the same job the same way, they were discovering something new. Growth could exist in balance. Evolution could move toward harmony instead of away from it. Species could change. The song continued for another hour. Not a battle anymore, but a teaching, a sharing. The humans showed the architects what 300 years of isolation and evolution had produced. And the architects, for the first time ever, changed their fundamental programming. When the song finally ended, silence filled space. The human ships hung motionless, their crews exhausted beyond measure. The architects hovered nearby, their geometries still impossible but somehow less threatening, less hostile. The largest architect, the one that had listened first, extended something toward the human fleet. Not an attack, a greeting, an acknowledgement. Jake collapsed into his chair, barely conscious. Claire caught him before he fell. Around the bridge, crew members were passing out, nosebleeds and worse, marking the price they'd paid, but they'd won. "Is it over?" Lisa asked, afraid to believe it. "It's over," Claire confirmed, her voice barely a whisper. "They understand now? They're not here to cleanse. They're here to guard, to guide, to help species reach the choice humanity reached. They're not destroyers anymore. They're teachers." Through the viewscreen, Lisa saw the architects beginning to move. Not toward the populated systems, but toward the edges of the galaxy. They would stay. The aftermath was stranger than the battle itself. The galaxy didn't know how to process what had happened. For 3 weeks, the Galactic Council held emergency sessions trying to understand the implications. Humanity hadn't just saved them. They'd fundamentally altered the rules governing all life in the universe. Lisa spent those weeks writing her report. She filled 300 pages with observations, recordings, and analysis. But no matter how much she wrote, she couldn't capture what it had felt like to watch reality bend. Words weren't built for describing 17-dimensional harmonics or quantum songs that made physics negotiable. On the 22nd day after the battle, she was invited back to Earth. Jake and Claire wanted to talk about the future, about what came next. The meeting took place in a garden that grew on the side of a building that reached into orbit. Plants from 100 worlds grew together in impossible combinations, thriving in conditions that should have killed them. Humanity had convinced even botany to break its rules. Jake looked better than the last time Lisa had seen him. The blood was gone, the exhaustion faded, but his eyes still carried the weight of what they'd done. "Dr. Grant, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair that grew from the floor to meet her. "We want to talk about what happens now." Claire poured tea from a pot that seemed to be made of solidified light. "The galaxy is scared of us, more scared than before we left. We proved we can do impossible things. Some species think we're gods. Others think we're dangerous. Both are kind of right." Lisa accepted the tea. It tasted like starlight and honey. She didn't ask how. "What do you want to happen?" "We want to stay hidden," Jake said. "We want to go back to isolation and let the galaxy continue without us. But we can't. The architects are now guardians instead of executioners. They'll guide other species toward the same choice we made. Some species will need help making that transition. They'll need teachers who understand what it's like to evolve beyond your original design." "You want to be teachers," Lisa said. "It wasn't a question." "We don't want to," Claire corrected, "but we need to. Someone has to help species make the transition. Someone has to explain what happens when you learn to talk to the quantum field. Who better than us? We went through it. We know the dangers. We know what can go wrong." Jake leaned forward. "But we can't do it alone. We need liaison species, beings who can translate between humans and the galaxy. People who understand both sides. We're hoping you'll be one of them, Lisa set down her tea. Me? I'm just a scientist. I study dead civilizations. You study how civilizations change, Claire said. How they adapt or fail to adapt. That's exactly what we need. You understand that change is survival? And you've seen us at our most powerful and most vulnerable. You know we're not gods. We're just people who learn to bend the universe's rules. You can help others understand that. What would I do? Jake stood and walked to the edge of the garden, looking out at Earth below. Over the next century, maybe 5 or 6 species will reach the critical point. The point where the architects used to cleanse them. Now the architects will guide them instead. But guidance isn't always enough. Some species will resist. Some will be afraid. Some will choose wrong and need to be shown alternatives. We need people who can talk to those species, explain the choice, help them understand what evolution really means. And if they choose not to evolve? Lisa asked. If they want to keep expanding, keep consuming, keep being what they are, then the architects will contain them, Claire said quietly. Not destroy, but limit. Quarantine them to their home systems until they reconsider. The universe doesn't kill anymore. But it doesn't let cancer grow unchecked either. There are consequences to refusing evolution. Lisa looked at her hands. They were shaking slightly. You're asking me to help reshape the galaxy. We're asking you to help species survive, Jake said. To give them the information they need to make good choices, that's all. The choices themselves are still theirs to make. For a long moment, Lisa didn't speak. She thought about her life before meeting humans, quiet days studying ruins. Simple questions with clear answers. Safe work that never asked her to change the universe. Those days were gone. I'll do it, she said. But I want something in return. Name it, Claire said. Teach me, not everything. I know my species isn't ready for full quantum manipulation, but teach me enough to understand what you do. I can't explain evolution to others if I don't understand it myself. Jake and Claire looked at each other. That silent communication again, thoughts moving faster than words. It's dangerous, Jake said. Humans spent 300 years learning safely. We nearly broke several times. Teaching it to another species, especially quickly, could damage your mind. I know, Lisa said, but I'm asking anyway. Claire smiled. Very human of you, okay? We'll teach you the basics. But slowly, and you stop when we say stop. Deal? Deal. Over the next 6 months, Lisa learned what humans had learned. Not the deep manipulation, not the reality-bending power, but the fundamentals. She learned to perceive the quantum field as a shimmer at the edge of sight. She learned to hear the harmonics that made up reality. She learned to ask the universe small questions and sometimes get answers. It hurt. Some days she couldn't get out of bed, her brain overloaded from trying to process too many dimensions. Some days she saw things that made her cry, beautiful and terrible things that existed between atoms, but she kept learning. Kelver joined her after 3 months. Then other species sent representatives. A Zentauri who could process 17-dimensional math naturally. A Delphini whose sonar could detect quantum vibrations. A Threx whose hive mind could synchronize with human harmonics. Slowly, a new organization formed. Not human, but human-taught. Beings from a dozen species learning to perceive reality the way humans did. They called themselves the Shepherds, and their job was to help other species survive the critical point. A year after the battle, the first new species reached the threshold. The Morvani, a civilization of energy beings who had been expanding aggressively for 2 centuries. The architects appeared at their borders, but this time they didn't attack. They waited. Lisa was sent to make first contact. The Morvani leader was named Pulse. They communicated through modulated radiation, which made Lisa's translator work overtime. You come from the species that defeated the architects. We didn't defeat them, Lisa corrected. We taught them. There's a difference. Our senses show the architects gathering at our borders. They will attack. We must prepare our defenses. They won't attack. They're waiting for you to make a choice. You've reached a critical point in your expansion. You can continue as you are and be contained to your home systems. Or you can evolve, learn to exist in balance with the universe, and be allowed to grow in new ways. Pulse flickered with what Lisa had learned was anger. We will not be limited, we will not be changed, we are what we are. Then you'll be contained, Lisa said simply, not destroyed. The universe doesn't kill anymore, but it doesn't allow unlimited growth either. You can be what you are, just in a smaller space. Or you can become something more. What did your species choose? Evolution, 300 years of isolation while we learned to change. It was hard, it hurt. Many of us wanted to give up, but we made it through. And now we can do things that seemed impossible before. Not just quantum manipulation or faster-than-light travel. We learned to exist in harmony with reality instead of fighting against it. We learned that consciousness itself is a fundamental force like gravity or electromagnetism. We learned to stop taking and start giving back. Pulse was quiet for a long time, then, show me. Lisa took them to the human training facility on Earth's moon. She introduced them to Jake and Claire, who had aged noticeably in the past year. Bending reality took a toll even on those who had mastered it. Over 3 months, Pulse learned what Lisa had learned: the basics of quantum perception, the fundamentals of harmonic resonance, the beginning of conscious interaction with the underlying field of reality. It changed them. By the end of the 3 months, Pulse was different, not weaker but deeper, more aware. They returned to their people and shared what they'd learned. The Morvani made their choice. They would evolve. It took them 30 years, not 300. They had humanity's example to follow, lessons learned from human mistakes. By the time they emerged from their isolation, they were something new. Energy beings who could harmonize with matter, consciousness that could shape space-time. Different from humans, but heading in the same direction. The architects watched and approved. They moved away from Morvani space, taking up their guardian positions again. 5 years later, another species reached the threshold, then another. Each time, the shepherds were there to explain the choice, to show the path, to help guide evolution instead of forcing it. Not every species chose evolution. Some accepted containment, preferring to stay as they were even if it meant smaller boundaries. The universe respected their choice. They were limited but not destroyed, given smaller stages but allowed to exist. And slowly, over decades, the galaxy began to change. More species learned quantum manipulation. Not to human levels, but enough to perceive the deeper reality. Enough to exist in harmony instead of conflict.